This episode is sponsored by Babs Benson. Born in Maryville, Tennessee, Babs found her way home after 40 years of searching to build a business as a curly hair specialist. She is a mom, a grandmother, and a lifelong musician with a soft spot for underdogs, and she believes in lifting people up, embracing natural beauty, and standing up for all women's rights. You can find her at Babs to the Bone, BABS, 2, THABONE, on both Instagram and Facebook. Hey everyone, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Her Story, or Her Story Community Voices. I'll be your host for this endeavor, Taylor Ford. And I figured, let's get us started on the right foot. Two of the things that I think are lacking in today's media are honesty and transparency. Let's be honest, most podcasts are trying to sell you something. And that's true for a lot of media. You're not going to get that from us. We're not a company in the traditional sense. We don't sell products. We aren't trying to hawk a subscription at you, although we would love if you subscribe to listen to us more. We're just in the business of trying to elevate other women's voices. And in that interest of transparency, I wanted to start off by introducing the members of our team so we can talk about our own experiences and how that's led us to this moment. We might have longer interviews with each of us later, but for now, this is just going to be a quick introduction. None of us are celebrities. We aren't household names. So I thought it important to make sure you know who we are and what we're up to. I wanted to start with the woman who helped us put all of this together, spearheaded the entire operation, and that would be Irene.
Hi. So I am Irene Guerinot, and to my friends and family, I'm known as Irene Guerinot. So I have my nickname, Irene. We started the Blount County Democratic Women almost a year ago, and we wanted to do something that would have not only a meaning, but also will help us foster community and, in some sense, empower the women that are members of that group. And the idea of sharing our stories, because stories hold so much power, was actually Anne's idea. And from that one idea, it has now morphed to a whole podcast. And so I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to ask everybody just a couple quick questions for each segment here. So, Rena, one of the fascinating things about you is that, unlike most of the people at this table, you are not from the U.S. originally. What do you think your experience has been that's different from ours as a woman from a different nation?
The difference is from my first culture, from the Greek culture, I'm originally from Greece. Women have bigger voices many times than the women in the United States, it feels like. To me, it feels like a very large percentage of women in the United States are not willing to push back. They are not willing to set boundaries. They are not willing to stand up for themselves. And that was very surprising when I came in the United States, because I thought it was going to be the other way around. Everything in the media, everything in the Hollywood, in the movies, prepares an outsider for a completely different attitude. And then I saw that the first surprise was that they were not celebrating in the United States Women's Day. International Women's Day was not happening. And now all over Europe, all over Asia, all over Africa, that is a very important day. That's the biggest thing I say. But at the same time, I will say that the struggles that women face in Greece are very similar to the struggles that women face here. The victories are celebrated the same way here, and they're celebrated the same way there. And after so many years stepping back and looking at it, I would say we have more in common than not.
I like that you started by saying, well, actually, we have more similarities, and then capping it off with that, because I did want to highlight that there are different experiences, but I think that you're right. There are a lot of universal women's experiences that, just by virtue of being born a woman, socialized a woman, however you want to put it, there are certain things that society is going to force you into a box about, and certain victories that I don't think our male counterparts are going to experience necessarily. And it is interesting to hear you talk about how much louder Greek women are than American women, because like you, I would have thought it would be the opposite. it makes me wonder if it's a puritanical thing, if it's just part of the background for our country, or if it's, I don't know, there's so many cultures that make America. We tend to forget that we're a melting pot. And I wonder if there are cultures that have less of a female presence.
About that, for the melting pot, I will say that because of that, you see also a lot of negative aspects.
Yeah.
The assimilation component.
Yes.
And I think that is what I witnessed when I came here. Things have changed now. And I think things have changed because my generation did not want to push our kids to be the same. Or when I came, I did not want to be pushed to be the same. I came as a graduate student at the University of Tennessee. And one of the first things that I was told is that the speech department at UT offers special classes and workshops for foreign students so that they will lose their accent.
Oh, dear.
Basically, yes. And I went once or twice, and then I thought, okay, this is part of my identity. But that's not what the previous generation did, because a lot of older Greek people that I met from the Greek Orthodox Church in Knoxville, they didn't want to speak the Greek language at home. They did not want their kids to know the Greek language because it was a very big push for assimilation. And I think that is what also happened here. Although it is the melting pot, at the same time, do you want to keep your identity and be part of the community? Right. It's very difficult if the community doesn't accept you, because you feel that in order to become one with the community, I have to change who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a thing I've noticed with different generations of immigrants coming in, is that the older generations, I don't know if it's because American exceptionalism was easier to believe back then, that they thought, well, I'm going to America, I need to, quote unquote, better myself and make myself part of that community. Or if it was maybe a sense of shame that they didn't need to feel, or just a need to fit in. But the younger people from your generation, probably the generation right before yours and down, has been more like, no, I'm American, but I'm also this. I'm also where I come from. This is part of me as much as living here is. And I think that's an important root to hold. But either way, I do like the acknowledgement of the universal women's experiences. And I think that's one of the things that we're going to be getting into once we start interviewing more people, is what we all have in common and what that means about society and what that means about ourselves. But pivoting from you, Irene, I'm going to address Anne. So, Anne, I know that you've been a huge supporter of everything that Irene's been doing. You've been a huge supporter of everything that this project is. What got you interested in this, and why do you think it's so important to elevate not just your voice, but other women's voices?
I think it's very important because you're right. I'm not famous. I've lived all over the world. I've lived in different cultures. And when I moved here about 15 years ago to this area, wherever I live, I've tuned into the culture of women. And the culture of women here in this county is very limited. I think that's evident by who is in politics. And I think it's evident in some other ways. But so I feel strongly about, yes, elevating my own voice in some little way, because I'm not used to speaking up. I didn't have a profession like Rena has had, where she speaks to people and she's a professor, and none of that for me. So I've not been a leader in any particular way. But as an ordinary person, I see the great need for women to have a voice and to hear what women have to say. One woman I spoke to recently in the county told me that she's maybe 35 years old. She said that people in her generation don't really have a voice, and we don't hear from them. She feels that she would love to talk on this podcast, and I'd love to have her come and speak exactly more how she feels as a working woman with young children. She has many issues that in dealing with the local government that she'd like to talk about. But what she does in terms of having a voice, at least, is she shares on Facebook with several groups of women who are mothers, young mothers, and working mothers. And she has this in common with them. But I feel like there's a lot to hear from women like this. I also think it's important to hear from women of all ages. Mm-hmm. I'm 76, so I am the oldest person, not probably, the oldest person here. And, so we need to hear I want to hear from young people, because the young people are the ones who are carrying our hopes and dreams into the future.
Well, as the youngest person at the table, I'll be 32 in a week.
Wow, gosh.
That a lot of that resonates with me. It's, a lot of people who don't pay a lot of attention to civics or history like to spout off things like, oh, well, racism can go both ways, and that's not quite accurate. Ageism can, though. I feel like a lot of the older generation discounts the lack of experience that younger people have, and younger people discount the lack of intelligence that older people can have. And I think that that's very unfair. I think that one of the gaps that we can help bridge, even if it's just locally with this podcast, is figuring out how to get those groups of people in conversation with each other.
Yes, and to listen.
Yeah, because there's so much we can learn from each other, just societally, from what we've each experienced in our own lives. There are things my mom knows I could never begin to chip away at the mountains and fountains of knowledge in her brain. But there are things that I know, especially technologically, that she could never dream of understanding because I grew up with it. And I think that's important for us to share. And it's interesting you brought up a point that kind of piggybacked off of what Rena said as well. It's interesting for me because I've lived in this community my entire life. And the reason I like to talk to people from other areas isn't to be like, oh, you're different, and call attention to that in a negative way. It's more of a learning experience because I've traveled the world, but I've only ever lived here. And it's interesting to hear what other people's perceptions of this area are and what they've noticed about what we lack and what we have that other people are lacking. And I know that it's not just xenophobic, because that implies people from other countries, and we definitely have that, but we also have a very insular community, I think is the best way to put it, where we don't even accept people from other parts of the country, sometimes not even other parts of the state. And
city.
Or the city, yeah. If you live in the county, you don't really trust people who live in the city, and vice versa. There's a huge class divide there. So you having had experiences all over the place and seeing what it's like to live here, that's going to be invaluable for us. Right. I'm going to introduce our third member now, Allie.
Hello, y'all. When I first heard we were going to do this in the Democratic Women's Club, I thought, oh my gosh, that sounds like a lot of fun. And I was excited because we had a real journalist volunteer, and she's not been able to stick with us, but hopefully she'll come back eventually. And so this podcast idea is new and different and not very Maryvillian. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun putting it together, and hopefully our listeners will click on to the next episode.
I think it's safe to say that no one in this room has ever done anything quite like this before. And your experience, I think, is even more rural than mine is, because you were a farmer.
Yes. Yeah. One of the reasons I love Blount County is because it's open and rural and spacious. And tonight I'm going to go to the Blount County Cattlemen's Association. And we have a really strong extension agency here. They're actually still getting farmers to be able to get grants to improve their farms. And, as much as Doge has ruined the USDA, and Blount County is still thriving. And I have to say, though, one of the reasons why we don't like outsiders is because we don't want them to move here. And that's all because of, say it with me, traffic.
I thought you were going to say gentrification.
Oh, yes. I will also say something about that it's similar to everywhere. That is the same in other parts of the world.
Oh, yeah. We're not unique in that.
Outsiders come, something changes, and human beings do not like change. We feel secure in the predictability.
Mm-hmm. It makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint. When we were all hunter-gatherers, having us versus them mentality is how we survived to this point in life. But we don't need that anymore. That's a skill that we no longer need for survival. And it's very hard to get that out of our old caveman brains.
I think we'd like to know that there are some limits to grow, the population growth and community growth, that there are some limits, that it's not just endless, because right now it feels that way.
Mm-hmm. And to Allie's point, we don't have the infrastructure for it. We're a very rural area, and we need to have planning for that before we ever start building more things. No, we're just like,
sprawl.
Yeah, just whack up another tenement building, basically, and shove people in there, and it's unaffordable, but whatever. So yeah, but yeah, I think that is one of the things that I've heard from people who've moved to the area that they like the most about Blount County as a region, is just that we still have a lot of green spaces that a lot of other people have lost. It's, I think, a nostalgic reminder, even for people who didn't grow up with it, of a time long ago where you could walk places and the air wasn't quite as smoggy. I think they have an idyllic idea of what this area is because of it. But people like Allie, the farmers in this region, they're among the voices that I think we all agree in wanting to elevate, because they're one of the groups that I think get very disenfranchised in this country.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we talk a lot about how women of color, people of color in general, get disenfranchised, impoverished people. But I think people in rural areas get the brunt of that too, not just because they're distanced from technology in a way that urban and suburban people are, but just there's a lot of misconceptions about how uneducated they are, how unclassy they are, that they're all going to have tobacco-stained teeth and not be able to pronounce anything because they're missing half their teeth, that they all talk through their noses, that they couldn't spell their own name on a sheet if they were asked to. These are all things I've heard from people who've talked directly to my family members. And it's, the classism is something we really need to be addressing. We like to think that we're different in that regard. I think America has this idea that we're not a classist nation because, in comparison to England, for example, where they still have royal titles and aristocracy, and classism is a very specific thing that you can point to by region. We don't really have that. Our classism is entirely different. But for that reason, we don't identify as easily. But either way, Allie's been a huge supporter for us. She's helped us put up our equipment. She's helped us get started. She's a real go-getter, and we appreciate having her.
She tested so much software.
Oh, yeah.
The software.
Yeah. The only reason we were able to do this right now is because she got all the recording stuff tested for us.
That's right. Go Allie. Go Allie.
And finally, we have our last member, Ginger.
Lord.
I know, putting you on the spot, putting you in the hot seat.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. I think this is awesome that we're starting this podcast. I think this can do so many things. I've retired in 2019 from teaching high school, which was kind of my third act in a very rural county in Anderson County. And what you were talking about, I ran into a lot of those things too. But then I also had kids that I taught that were suffering from, poverty. And most of my kids that I taught, as soon as they left school, it was high school, they'd have to go to Burger King or someplace and close it down, like at 11 or 12 at night. So I used to tell them, if I can't teach you anything in 90 minutes, then I'm not very good as a teacher. But yeah, I think it's so important. And I listen to so many podcasts now that I'm retired. I walk around the house with these things in my ears all the time, listening to all these people. And I think it's a great way to listen to other people and see how they are. And it's interesting listening to y'all too, as your experiences are, because kind of like Rena and Ann, I grew up in New England. And so, they're kind of cranky Yankees up there.
Cranky Yankee, we're going to have to borrow that, unfortunately.
The richest person in Bedford, New Hampshire, who lived near the town hall, drove a Volkswagen. She was about 85 years old, and she'd shovel her own driveway because, by God, she could do it herself.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they were pretty tough. And no self-pity in that place. No. No pity paws. But I'm just glad to be here and get to know all of you, too, as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Ginger. And thank you for bringing that up. I forgot to mention with Rena's that she's also an educator, and you both have fascinating histories being teachers, because you've heard from so many different students and gotten to see so many different experiences with the classes you've taught and the subjects you've taught as well. what do you think is different generationally from when you started teaching to where you are now? And Rena, you can answer
I'd
this
have
too.
to open my purse and take my phone out. I would say that is probably one of the biggest things. I worry about that a lot. I have 3 grandchildren, and I know my 2 granddaughters, one of whom will be graduating from high school this year, and the other one just started at web school in Knoxville this year. She's 14, and their parents have been very, very careful about how they use their phones and the amount of screen time and all of that. I think that's so hard on kids. I can't imagine when I think back when I was a teenager to have my whole life broadcast on a phone, on Snapchat. I mean, I can't keep up with all of the apps because there's so much stuff. And these poor girls, we're talking about women, they get the kids I taught. A lot of the girls, the thing they wanted to grow up to be was a celebrity. And I was like, a what? A who? And she said, like the Kardashians. I said, but what do they do? Other than just have their life sort of played out. I said, that's not really real and everything. But that's what they wanted to do. And I'd say, no. I mean, but wanting to be a celebrity, I don't know where you want to go with that. I mean, there's all kinds of, singer, dancer, actor, but just to be a celebrity, And I think that's one of the biggest things I saw was this whole social media construct and how these kids were getting their self-esteem and how that could be ruined. And having grown up in New England, I'll tell you something. If I did notice this when I moved to the South, is that people talk behind your back a lot. And so in New England, you can't get away with that because where I grew up, if you had a problem with somebody, you just went up to them and said, I have a problem. You didn't, I didn't go talk to Ann about you, So in other words, you settled it right then and there so you didn't have all this backstabbing. And that I found culturally very different. And then I've always heard too, if you live near a coast of some sort, like we live near, the ocean. Well, we live near everything is a lot closer in New England. States are very small.
Yes.
So you have a more open mind. And if you live near mountains, you're a little more, you're a little bit more, suspect of these newcomers coming into town, because you're more of a clannish thing,
Exact same thing in Greece.
Do you agree?
100%.
Yeah.
The island people are so more open, welcoming because they depend. Everything depends. Their livelihood depends on that too. People coming in, you have to go and bring some things that you couldn't grow on that island, right? So you have. While the people that lived in the mountains, they were very similar to what you just described. Very similar.
Yeah. Interesting. So and then Anne, who's lived all over the world, I bet she saw some of that too, in some ways.
Oh, yeah.
And so it is kind of I guess our Scottish-Irish heritage too has a lot to do with that too, because it was very clannish. They were very clannish people anyway. And
they had to be, and it makes sense because they moved over here during the height of tensions with the English. So it was, we trust our own and not the English who migrated with us.
Right. Correct. Yeah. And for Tennessee, what Allie was talking about, the outsiders and the farms and all that.
Yes.
2 things that happened in the state that took away land in a very big numbers, not just because the Manhattan Project.
Yes.
Yep.
Threw away all the farmers, and TVA was the water. The same thing again. They destroyed farmland.
That's right.
And so it is a natural, obviously, reaction because you say, okay, what is the next development going to do to my not only way of living, but my livelihood?
Right. Yeah. Because it would take their whole land. All the farms would go underwater. And they'd be kind of like the movie, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Yes, I love
Which,
that
by the
movie.
way, my students loved that movie.
Yes.
They could recite it back and forth and sing all the songs. It was a big hit on Fridays.
She done RUNNOFT.
Yeah.
I've told people from other places in the country that I'm friends with that it's very weird to explain this to them because that movie is set in the 30s. It's still very accurate to my life growing up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s, but it's still not much changed here.
My dad grew up in Chattanooga and St. Elmo, just in Chattanooga, but just outside of Chattanooga. And he said he remembers when Chattanooga downtown would flood every year. So they loved TVA when it came, but they were living in Chattanooga, right?
Right.
So that part was good because they didn't have any more floods. So of course he was also the guy that got up at 4 and delivered the newspapers up on Lookout Mountain, and kind of those I walked 10 miles in the snow to get to school, that kind of.
Yeah.
Uphill the way.
Yeah. In the summer, even.
Yeah. I did it all the time. That's right.
That's such a good thing to bring up, though, because one of the things I hope we get into in further interviews is how different perspective can change what an event looks like.
Absolutely.
And for women, especially, the thing that always comes to mind with me is the difference between purity culture and chosen purity, I guess is how you could put it, or being conservative by choice versus having it forced upon you. Because I know plenty of women who want to dress modestly by choice, and there are women who are forced to do that as kids or forced to by their ex-husbands, for example.
Right.
And how you rebel looks very different from those two cultures.
Absolutely.
And what you consider oppressive is very different from those two cultures. So like you mentioned with Chattanooga, for a city, that was a lifesaver. But for the rural areas, it killed so much.
Correct. Yes.
And I think it's very important to see there aren't always both sides of a story. That's something that I think can get harmful, the both sidesism of everything. But a lot of things there are. A lot of things that we need to be listening to each other about.
And I think listening is just so important, to listen. And as Anna's often said, too, it's the stories. Just like we're seeing now with the Winter Olympics,
Yes.
That's been kind of a godsend in a lot of ways because of all the stuff that's going on in politics. It's kind of fun to just watch ice dancing.
Yeah.
Or when you just want to laugh, watch curling. That I have no idea what that is. But it's kind of, it's just sort of to escape to another perspective,
Yeah. And I agree with that. He's not a woman, but there's a man I follow who's a comedian. His name is Josh Johnson. And he had a whole bit about how art can save your soul, but entertainment will never unchain you. And it's just as that. Wherever we now and then we need a break, but don't rely on entertainment to be your salvation.
Correct.
But it is important that we do get those breaks every now and then just to experience joy. Because I think that any oppressive force in the world, the biggest way they try to attack people is to make them lose their joy. Because the moment you lose your joy, you lose the will to fight for anything because you have nothing to fight for. So I think that having these moments of levity are so important. It's not just about the serious stuff. It's not just about all the trials and tribulations we've gone through. It's what do we want to celebrate?
Right.
What do we enjoy? What are the good things about life?
Right. And there's lots of good things,
All right, well, I guess that leaves me.
Yeah, it does. It leaves you.
Go ahead. Knock it out of the park.
You complete the circle here.
Well, I just had a couple of things that I wanted to mention.
Right.
The first one is that my experience, I'm not a professor the way that Irene is or a teacher like Ginger is, but I am a fairly well-educated woman. And you would think that that would open up a lot of opportunities for me. And it has financially. I have access to a lot of jobs that my peers don't, that my parents could never have dreamed of. And I'm not discounting that. I'm not suggesting like, oh, poor little white passing, in my case, girl, how, dare she complain about it. I'm not opening the door for that. It's just that when you are from a rural community, it's important to note that intellect is not a selling point. And I think that a lot of people assume that attitude comes from this sense of, a faith-based community that rejects education because they want an unquestioning mass. And I mean, there are elements of that here. I did grow up Christian, so I got to see some things, but that wasn't my experience, even when I did go to church. I feel like there's something more at play. One of the things that people in urban and even more suburban communities don't get is that people in underprivileged communities we're well aware of the rampant ignorance in our midst. We know we're underprivileged. We know there's a lot we don't know. But there's also a really serious inferiority complex about that. And I credit my parents with helping me see through that veneer at a young age. My mom was always trying to educate me. She would have been an incredibly educated woman had she not dropped out of school. And hopefully I'll have her on the show at some point. But until then, I'll just briefly say that she dropped out because of family issues and just having a lack of opportunities. And my dad was the same. She dropped out, I think, her senior year of high school. My dad dropped out in 8th grade. And she never wanted me to feel the way she did. And I remember her saying that to me so often when I was growing up. I never want you to feel X like I did. I never want you to feel shame like I did. I never want you to feel trapped like I did. And I never did, thanks to her. But my dad helped me see through some different things. The first thing to mention here is that he's a consummate troll. He would poke holes into Sunday school class lessons, like even the preacher's sermons, mostly to rile them up, because he gets a kick out of riling up people who think they're experts but don't actually know that much about what they claim to know. But, on occasion, he'd have a genuine question, and because they didn't know the answer, Dad would double down on it. And they still wouldn't know the answer, so they'd just dismiss him out of hand and move on. And I saw a lot of the reaction to that ignorance in my dad, both the questions he had and the way that he was treated for asking them. My parents are both very, very intelligent people. They would tell you that they're not. They're lying. They have an idea about intellect that I think correlates it with education. And that's not the only way that intelligence presents itself. They both know things I could never fathom if I tried. But my dad especially, he grew up with a lot of toxic masculinity that demanded a lot of him. And part of that made him feel the same sense of inferiority I saw in the men around me growing up. He dealt with it as healthily as he could, which was showing people up in the ways that he knew he excelled at. But more than that, encouraging me to study all the things he was never given a chance to learn. He never had any of the issues of, well, you're not a boy, so you can't do these things. We knew from an early age I was not going to be athletic, but that didn't stop him from treating me as a person or being like whatever my interests or pursuits were. He encouraged those. And I don't think a lot of people had that. I don't think a lot of girls in this community especially had that. But through him, I was able to learn that instead of embracing the truth, that there are things that people in this community know that educated people struggle to learn, but that they themselves were lacking in other areas. They fell into this trap of thinking that their lack of opportunity made them lesser. And instead of embracing the idea that they could change that, they decided to take out their inferiority on everyone else. So there's a lot of hatred for education and questioning in this area because it undermines power. But they also push against it because the more questions you ask, the more you find out about how little they actually know. And that grates against a part of them that they're very sensitive about. So when you do have an education in these kinds of communities, they bring all of their baggage and insecurities into every interaction they have with you.
Right. Like in the two communities, the religious community and the scientific community, the word theory means something completely different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of my favorite professors, and I'm blanking on his name now, unfortunately, but he was a science professor. His very first day of class, he taught me something that has stuck with me since then, and it's been over a decade now. He said, religion seeks to answer why, science seeks to answer how. We are not conflicting beliefs.
Right.
So leave that at the door.
It's true.
So what compelled you to be our host and be in charge of our podcasts, Taylor?
Well, I'll be completely honest. Anne asked, and there are very few things Anne can ask of me that I wouldn't say yes to.
So we're sending Anne.
And she's the best friend.
Yes, Anne is so sweet, and she's so responsible, and she's always trying to do the best she can, and I always appreciate that about her. But also,
She's one of the kindest people I've ever known.
yes. But also, I knew that Rena was involved, and I didn't know that Allie was involved yet, but I knew that Rena was involved, and I've seen her moral integrity in everything that she's done and been part of the groups that she's led. And I thought that even though I don't have the best experience in this necessarily, I studied journalism in school, but I never had a career as a journalist. I do write for a living, but it's a very different kind of writing. I thought maybe this is an area where I could bring some of my expertise and maybe do some good. And I think that's the only thing that any of us can do really is just try to do the best we can with what we got.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Yeah. We're very glad you agreed.
Yes, I'm very thankful.
Well, thank you.
And I like having all ages
Me too.
Although,
Yeah.
I think Anne and Rena and I may share some ages. I'm in my 70s too. So it's not. In fact, I woke up the other day and I went, "Oh yeah, my birthday! Oh no!"
The simultaneous excitement and then dread.
I'm like, "Oh geez, I don't have much left." I'm like,
Oh, dear Lord.
Anyway, it's pretty funny.
I love that. I complain to my mom too, and she makes fun of me because I'll be 32 in a week, and I'm already starting to feel it. It's ridiculous.
You just wait. Yeah,
That'll be a good topic to get into later as well. Just the ageism that women experience. I don't think men do, at least not in the same way. But that's all I've got for us for right now. I thought, let's just go ahead and introduce everybody, make sure you know who the team is behind the scenes, so you know when you're listening to us what we're about, where we're from, what our perspectives are, and why we think this is so important to do. And with that, I think we're going to sign off.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Taylor.
Taylor.
Thank you.
Good job.